of Bronson Dant's amazing brain and his capabilities to listen to new stuff is incredible. And I just want to say it's 7 hours in, Bronson, and I've just read IV as 4 because I'm that old. I used to write in Roman numerals. So anyway, Dr. Sabrina Salt, that has been a pleasure. Thank you for doing that extra 15 minutes. So many.
Thank you, Sabrina. Absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. Good luck the rest of the Carnivore-thon. Hopefully you guys get to eat and drink something, meaty and refreshing. But yeah, you guys are doing awesome. So good job. Good job on this.
You guys should have a whole 30-minute session where it's just you eating.
Yes.
That's part of this.
Just putting a ribeye away. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Bye. Thanks, Sabrina. Thank you.
Right. Bronson Dant, Coach Bronson, star of the Reverse TV series. Now, I've written introductions for everybody, but it's not really working. I'd rather you to just introduce yourself, sir, if you don't mind.
Sure. Coach Bronson. I've been carnivore for a little over 5 years. I'm 51 years old. I didn't get started on this journey really until my late 30s. I was almost 40 years old when I decided, hey, I need to do something because I'm fat and out of shape and depressed and can't do anything like I want to do. So my journey has not been short. It's been up and down. I've been fat. I've been skinny. I've been fat. I've been skinny until I realized that it's not about being fat or skinny. It's about being able to do the things that you want to do. And that's really what my message is all about right now.
And do you know Richard?
I do not. Hi, Richard.
Hey there, Coach. How are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing fantastic. Got my coffee. I'm good to go.
Right,
fantastic.
Richard, you have 45 seconds to fill Coach Bronson in and your journey, your weight loss and where you were.
Just 45?
Yes, just 45 seconds. We haven't got long. We've only got 14 hours left.
Just the 14. So yeah, I used to be type 2 diabetic. I was clinically obese. I suffered with daily debilitating migraines would make me blind, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, arthritic pains. In my mid to late 20s, I could barely walk up the stairs without stopping or being severely out of breath. Super long story short, changed my diet unknowingly. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that bread used to make me feel uncomfortable, and that's where I began on my journey. 12 months later, I'd lost 107 pounds, reversed my diabetes, no longer suffered with chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, arthritic pains. My migraines had cleared up. I still suffer with migraines, but this is usually to do with lack of sleep or stress, which when you work for yourself, unfortunately go hand in hand. But I used to suffer with these daily debilitating migraines every day that would make me blind, for which I was on 3 different medications for. I went on to compete as an amateur in men's physique bodybuilding and then became professional, won the British Championship and then the European Championship. Yeah. Awesome. So I went from being unable to walk up the stairs in my mid-20s to being #1 in Europe within 5 years of living a ketogenic carnivore style lifestyle. And now I try to teach others to do the same, which is where you jumped in on, I believe, early on in regards to preaching. We try to scream it from the rooftops in the same way, I guess, as you do. You've come across what I tell people or regard as a secret. I found a secret, and I'm trying to tell as many people as I can about my secret, this secret that goes literally against the grain, goes against everything that we've been told. But it's so simple, and it comes back down to, and I know we've highlighted there's other contributing factors, environmental factors, but most of this comes down to diet, nutrition. Nutrition is key. And unfortunately that is negated or passed to one side, if you will, in lieu of medications, which is unfortunate, but that's the short version. Was
right.
that short?
Was a little over 45 seconds. I don't know.
45 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, Bronson. I mean, that's why I had to do 24 hours just to get Richard's answers. No other reason. But anyway, you two guys should hook up at some point and do a podcast, because you two are fantastic. Your knowledge about training and exercise. And this isn't flannel to the people out there that think it's not. I've invited people on because I think they have got a lot to give. And these two guys are great. Richard is my co-host today, so we're doing 24 hours. But Coach Bronson, we got for an hour or 45 minutes. So I asked people to submit some questions right now.
Shoot.
Your followers are about the best there are, because they don't do these long novels. They do this question, right? So here's from one of them. Hey, why carnivore?
I love it.
It's funny because sometimes the shorter questions have the longer answers.
Yes.
That could be, we could do the whole 24 hours on just why. I mean, that's what this whole thing is about, right? This whole 24-hour thing is about why carnivore. So why carnivore? Gosh.
Maybe let's make it easier. Why carnivore for you then?
I was just going to say my story for carnivore for me. There's a couple things. Number one, I had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, urgent bowels. My life was pretty much governed by how close I could be or how quickly I could get to a bathroom. So there was anxiety, stress. I tell people that I didn't lose 150 pounds. I had a 70-pound overall loss, but I didn't lose 150, 200 pounds. I wasn't severely obese, morbidly obese. But the biggest change from the reduction of stress, anxiety, feeling of limitations in my life came around the tether and the chain that I had to a bathroom. And just my ability to travel, my ability to do things, enjoy things where I wasn't always thinking about, am I okay? Is something going to happen that I'm not ready for? And that going away, that took less than 90 days for me going carnivore. I went carnivore May 1st, 2018. Within a few months, I realized, hey, look, all these things that I'm stressed about, all these things I'm doing to prepare for the inevitable, I didn't need to do anymore. And it's been over 5 years since that. So living free of that anxiety has been one of the biggest changes in my life. On top of that, from a physical performance perspective, from a feeling perspective, from feeling my age, I was 40, almost 40 when I started this journey. I was 45 when I started carnivore. And I just felt like I was 65, 70, 80 years old. I owned a CrossFit gym. I worked out all the time. And I thought it was just my level of activity that was keeping me worn down. I was at a point where if I worked out any more than 3 days a week, I felt horrible. I had aches and pains and injuries and pulled hamstrings, torn meniscus, torn labrums, torn calves. I just one injury after another, one chronic pain after another. I just could never feel okay. I felt like I'm doing all this stuff to get in shape, but I'm always in pain and everything always feels bad. What's going on? Again, within about 3 to 6 months of going carnivore, everything changed. I went from 3 days a week to being able to do 5 or 6 days a week of my CrossFit workouts and feeling absolutely great. The chronic issues of pain and the issues that I've been dealing with for years previously, not only did I not have any new things come up, but they all went away. The things that I had been dealing with, I no longer had to deal with. I didn't wake up in the morning and have to take 10 minutes to warm up just to start my day. I didn't have to warm up for 30 minutes before my workout and then stretch for 20, 30 minutes after my workout just so that I felt okay the next day or 2 days or 3 days. I could go in, do a quick general warm up, get ready for the work that I was going to do my workout, do a cool down and go home and be ready to do that again the next day. And I felt fantastic. So not only did my quality of life improve by getting rid of the injuries, getting rid of the pain, the chronic issues, but I was able to actually improve even beyond where I was because I was able to actually train more and get the consistency back into my routine that I hadn't been able to do before I changed the way I ate. So for me, the two biggest things were health and performance.
Well, I thought Richard would dive in there because you are birds of a feather, because the training is a big part of your life. But I think, isn't it funny that it has to happen to us, even though we're interested in fitness? I've been a personal trainer a long time, and it was only when I really realized my health was going south that I got serious about research. And I think that's one of the things that is, I'm ashamed to say that. I will be honest. And it took me a long time. I didn't start low carb until I was 50, and then keto and then carnivore when I was 55. So now I'm 59, and I just look back and think, my eyes should have been opened, but we are saturated with such misinformation. It's difficult to see through that screen, which is deliberate. They want to keep you ignorant of what you should be eating. So that's great. Did you want to ask a question, Rich?
No, I mean, just to add to something you just said there now, that I think the reason that we do what we do is because we've been in that situation prior. I think if we were thriving in our 30s and 40s, then maybe we wouldn't have made the decisions that we have now. So it's, we look at these events as being unfortunate, but it's what's made us the people that we are today. And because of that, we've learned, and we are now able to teach others, so they don't have to fall into the same pitfalls and make the same mistakes that we do. But yeah, similar story, really. I mean, the three of us have come from massive ill health and improved, health and well-being from being carnivore. I used to get gastro distress issues. I've worked with clients with severe IBS who have paid private and paid thousands and thousands of pounds for medicines to help. And the one thing that changed their life was 2 weeks of going carnivore. And it is as simple as that. When people think, people quite often ask me, what would you do for this? What would you? And it's the answer. It sounds boring, but it's almost always the same. It comes down to food, and there are variances within this. And I think this is the reason why a lot of influencers, who I do respect within the community, seem to deviate from the message lately. I wonder if it's because you can't keep on saying, go and eat a steak. It's the same message, and I think that they need to change the message they are giving for attention, because they get paid for these views.
Yeah, and that's the challenge when you have people who are trying to be influencers versus people who are trying to coach and help people. And again, I talk a lot about context, and you've got to listen to where the people are coming from, what their experience is, and what their purpose is. So there's a lot of people out there in carnivore space, and I not disparaging anybody, but I want everyone to understand that there are a lot of people in the carnivore community who are on YouTube or social media who are not doing this to help people. And you have to look at the background. You have to look at what these people are actually doing and track their message. Is their message consistent? Okay, because here's the deal. Boring works best every single time. If you're not getting a consistent message and that message changes, now there's a difference between I learned something new, so I need to make a tweak or change or nuance of what I'm saying, but the core value, the core basics and principles of what I'm saying should never change if you're really trying to do something that works. Okay, if you're just trying to keep up with the latest trends so that you can get good views and get your monetization on YouTube up, that's a whole different conversation. So, boring works best. I look at myself as a lighthouse. I'm not going to attract everybody, but the people that need me are going to see the light. And then at some point in time, they're not going to need me because they passed me, and now they're looking for the next thing in their journey. So I'm not going to go out and get in a boat and try to go all over the ocean and try to say something different and catch everybody's attention. I'm sticking my flag in the sand, and this is here for people when they need it. And that's how it should be for each of us.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you'll find interesting, and Rich doesn't even know this, I've not done this publicly, but when I decided that we should do a 24-hour live stream, okay, I think some people don't understand that everyone is giving their time up, but there's no money changing hands, nothing's happening, and we're just doing it because we think it's great to get the word out there. Well, I had quite a few messages, and you won't believe this, that just didn't like what I was doing, and in essence, they were saying, "How are you going to stretch out 24 hours saying just eat steak?" I had that. No, I get that. I got that totally. And, I answered everybody. I said, well, I agree with you, but it's not going to get people doing it.
Yeah.
You've got to be different. You've got to get out there and spread the word, because someone that could survive from just eating steak needs to hear personal experiences, personal stories. They need affirmation, because they might be in a group where everybody is like I used to be when I was 20. Don't eat fat, man. You've got to have loads of carbs. So it is how you look at stuff, and I think a lot of people just didn't believe that there was no monetary thing going on. Oh,
Sure.
you're going to give 24 hours of your time. Now, the other thing is, and I defended it, and I said, look, the other side, you know, the anti-carnivore lot or the anti-low-carb lot have money. They have loads of money. They can make beautiful videos, great advertising. They've got the media in their back pocket. The only way you're going to get some traction is to do something different, something unusual. We've had tons of comments saying, is this really going to be 24 hours? How are you doing? You know, so I think people have watched purely because no one's ever done a 24-hour live stream. That's it. It's just trying to get the word out. Now, if at the end of it, let's say every single hour we get one person, and you know, I did a success stories recently. That one person then got all of his family.
Yeah,
you know, and that's it. You know, they're off medications. They haven't got non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. They're not got diabetes, right? Well, I can sleep at night with that. I can really sleep at night knowing that's happening. See, I'm getting a bit emotional now because I was there. I was. Coronary artery calcium scan 639. I was having a colonoscopy. I had lower left quadrant pain. I lost my mum to colon cancer. I was in that ward after that colonoscopy thinking, that's it. I'm 49. I'm going to die because it's genetics. Never once did I go, maybe it was what I was eating, because I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, and I didn't have red meat, and I didn't eat fat. So I'd done everything right. And here I was, tubby, you know, I was a personal trainer. I was training people in the Olympics to throw javelins. You know, I was not a slouch. And anyway, right. So that's why we're doing it, guys. So I've just maybe 20 emails there have just been dealt with in one thing. So we've got the word here. Calling themselves saved. That's the other thing. So saved implies they've done this and something's happened. Here's a question. Does number of ketones matter? I'm only able to get to 1.8 if fasting for more than 20 hours. Normal day, just 0.2 to 0.5. And for those that are listening on the audio, Coach Bronson just shook his head. So, yeah, do they matter? What do you reckon?
Yeah, ketones matter because they're great, but having extra does what for us? So there's a couple principles to think about, and that is one, minimum effective dose. You know, we talk about that in medicine. We talk about that when applying solutions to things. And there's a certain amount that you need so your body can function. But anything over that, what's the point? If we look at ketones as excess fuel in the blood as being a good thing for some reason, I'm not sure why. But if we look at excess glucose in the blood, that's a bad thing. So in one hand, excess fuel is good. In one hand, excess fuel is bad. That doesn't make sense to me. What makes sense to me is the processes that go into creating and utilizing the fuel. How well are those things functioning? And ketones doesn't tell us that if we're looking for high ketones. Lower ketones does tell us that. So in a lot of cases, when somebody is first getting started, high ketones, great, your body's transitioning, you're adapting, but you should expect to see those ketone numbers go down the more your body gets good at using them. If you are ingesting a lot of extra that your body can't use, then what's the point? Again, it's really like, I only need so much. Why am I going to put extra in? It just doesn't make sense to me. So it also leads to thinking about this as a weight loss solution, not a lifestyle solution. So most time when people are looking at their ketones, it's because they want to be in optimal fat burning, right? How am I burning enough fat off my body? Well, how about let's look at how is your body working? Are you building lean mass? How is your movement? Do you have energy throughout the day? Are the other aspects? And we need to get away as much as possible from thinking about weight as being our metric for success. Just looking at, let's just say we talk about the medical, what we consider medical, right? The blood work. There's 15, 20, 30, 50, 100 different measures and metrics in blood work that you can look at to see if you're making an improvement. If we add in fitness and quality of life aspects, how well do you move? How well does your metabolism function? There's another 30 or 40 things that we can look at there. From things that we can look at. Are we getting better? Am I getting stronger? Am I getting more flexible? Can I move easily? Am I have aches and pains that are going away? Just looking at weight is looking at one symptom of a problem, not even looking at the problem itself. And you're focusing all of your decisions on that symptom. And instead of looking at what is causing the weight, what is causing the extra fat, and then trying to deal with that. So long story short, no, ketones don't matter. Worry about how your body's actually functioning, and you'll have a lot more success.
Rich?
Yeah, I agree. I think there are situations I've noticed in regards to some of the athletes that we work with that increased ketones may improve, athletic performance. There's other studies when we look at increased ketones for cancers and things like that. But look, I was chasing ketone levels when I began my journey. My ketone level is, if I test it now, is probably 0.4, 0.5 if I'm lucky. And again, as Coach Bronson says, initially the ketones are elevated, but the body begins to utilize them as beta hydroxybutyrate and not waste them as acetoacetate and acetone. So your ketone levels drop. So what we see in the Facebook groups is people looking at their blood glucose and their ketone levels and chasing the ketone readings. And the ketone reading it doesn't mean anything. If you are keto adapted, if you've been ketogenic for a long time or carnivore, your blood ketone levels are going to be lower. And this scares a lot of people. So a lot of people along their journey will test on the urine test strips, which is the first thing to go. And I am an advocate of people using these because it does give them the indication initially if they are consuming the right foods. Because for us, I mean, we're seasoned ketonians, if you like. We know exactly what foods.
Ketonians, I love it.
You can use that one. We've been living the lifestyle for a long time. We know exactly what affects our ketone levels, our blood sugar. But early on in the journey, I was consuming foods that, I deemed to be healthy that were detrimental to my health. So it's a learning phase. And I think the urine strips are a way, a segue, if you like, into learning about which foods affect that. But they won't work for long. The urine strips will begin to stop working. And then soon after, you spend a fortune on a blood ketone monitor, and then these stop working because the ketone levels in your blood become lower and lower. The best way, as Coach Bronson says, is how you move, how you feel. If you were not consuming any of these foods that are detrimental to your health, if you were not consuming foods that contain grains or foods that contain seed oils or foods that are high in linoleic acid, if you were causing no glycation, no oxidative stress within your body and you feel amazing, does it really matter what your ketone levels are anyway? It doesn't. I could not tell you what my ketone levels are because I have not tested for such a long time.
Yeah, I think I tested just because I heard about it when I first got started for like 3 months, and then I stopped. That was 5 years ago, right? You just took the words right. I just wrote down a note that I was going to say, like, it doesn't matter. People that are worried about testing, the only thing you really need to worry about testing is if you're doing something that might throw it off. So if you're not doing the things that you should be doing from a dietary perspective, then testing can be helpful because okay, this is affecting, this is doing that, whatever. And like you said, from a learning perspective, it's trying to see as you make these changes in your life. But in general, if I'm putting 93 octane in my car, and that's the only thing I'm putting in my car, do I need to test my exhaust to see if 93 octane is what my car is using? Right? I'm not going to put 93 octane, test my exhaust, and it's going to come out and say, oh, you use 85. Like, no, if I'm putting 93 and that's all I'm doing, then what else is there to do? Why do I need to test it?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the ketone urine strips as well, I often say to people, because I do the phlebotomy side of things, you do realize that urine is waste. Okay, so whatever's on that strip is your body. I said, don't need those. So, yeah, it's telling you maybe you got a lot of ketones and we're not using them. It doesn't really matter. What matters is what's happening at the tissue level and how you feel. I mean, it really is that simple. How you feel and how you act, how you look is better than numbers. So with that said, Scott Seidel has got this. What advice would you give someone who has had success with, look at this, rubbing his hands, who has had success with Carnivore and is thinking about becoming a coach? Well, I'll give you one bit of advice. Don't do a 24-hour live stream.
Not right off the bat, at least. Okay, so this is fantastic. I love this question because this is, for me, I I am a coach's coach. I love working with coaches. I love helping other people help other people. My passion and my long-term goal eventually is to have something in this realm where I'm doing coaching for coaches. Because I feel like as much as I can help an individual, as much as I can do challenges and programs and all that other kind of stuff, I'm limited in my ability to spread myself out and help people. So helping coaches who can do that again, right, get that ripple effect going is what it's all about. Scott, I think the biggest thing that you can do, number one, is just start telling your story. Okay. The imposter syndrome and people feeling like, well, I'm not, who's going to listen to me? I'm not polished. I'm not professional. Who cares? Okay. The biggest part of being a coach is being able to share your story, find people that connect with that story, and then help them through their journey. That's really all it is. So your story is going to be different than my story. It's going to be different than everybody else's story. So there's going to be people that connect to it. Start sharing your story. That doesn't mean become a YouTuber. That could just mean just talking to people that you know. That could mean, when you meet people, when you're out. Okay, this is one that I see that I try to do all the time. When you're out and you're eating dinner and the waitress says, do you want your bun with your burger? And you say no, and they look at you weird, you could tell them why. Don't be afraid to share your story. That's the number one thing. From there, get as much information as you possibly can. Read all the books, listen to all the YouTubes, listen to all the different podcasts that are out there. And then thirdly, start networking with people. Get involved in the community, get involved in events, go to all the conferences you possibly can go to all the meetups, meet people, get to know other people that are doing it, and expose yourself to the community more so that you can be in touch with what people need, and it will help you find your message and how best you can help people out.
What about you, Rich? Have you got any advice?
Yeah, love that. It again, it comes back to that vegan in the pub statement that you made earlier. I've almost been ostracized from friends and family sometimes when it comes to events. They'll go away on holiday or they'll go for a meal somewhere, and I don't get invited. And the reason being is that I probably preach a little bit too much, and I think that some of this again comes down to them feeling uncomfortable, because if I, for example, used to get invited to go to the pub with a few friends. I used to drink an awful lot. So I don't know if Coach Bronson knows this, but I used to come home from work and I would drink a glass of wine. One glass led into two is nearly a bottle. So it was a bottle. And then before long, it was 2 and then 3 bottles. So I was drinking up to 3 bottles of wine a night or a litre of whiskey. Technically an alcoholic, although, I didn't feel that I wasn't, I had a professional job. I wasn't, a bum drinking on the side of the road, but yeah. Technically from the unit, I was alcoholic, but I don't drink anymore. So when it came to going out for drinks with friends, I would drink at the time, a lot of coffee, as most of us do as we gravitate into keto and carnivore. So I'd sit there with my coffee and cream, and I'd feel content and happy, but they would feel uncomfortable. Why aren't you drinking a beer? Have a beer. I've bought you a beer. Here's the beer. I don't want the beer. Or do you want some whiskey or something? I don't want it. Yeah. They'd order a plate of chips, or whatever. Have one. I don't want it. Oh, you must want it. I don't want it. Why would? And then it gives me a stage and to say, do you understand that these foods contain this, this, and this? This food contains, is high in lectins, or it's cooked in these seed oils. This is the damage it causes. So that almost gives me a stage then to spout off. But if I eat out, I make a point of going into the restaurant, and when the waitress comes up to me and asks me what I'd like, the first question is, what you cooking? And it's always vegetable oil. So I'll say that I'm allergic to vegetable oil. I'll make a point of telling them that vegetable oil is detrimental to your health. So I'm always getting up on so coming back to the point you made about every opportunity of telling people and spreading that word, it has had a negative impact in regards to friendships and family events. But I thrive on that because that's what drives me forward. I make a point. People will say, oh, one won't hurt. I don't want the beer. I don't want to eat, that burger or those fries or chips or whatever it may be. so I like making that point and making that stand. So that's that's a highly important point that I think is worth making. You need to almost be that. I know Stephen said earlier, don't be that vegan at the bar. I am that anti-vegan at the bar. Then if you like, telling everybody that I'm keto, I usually, my number plate on my car, which I've sold recently to put into the business, was keto. The license plate number was K77ETO. I had keto. Keto to the core. I walk around with keto all strapped all over me, and I try to scream it as much from the rooftops as I can, and I think that's really important because it comes back to this ripple effect. This is the best way to press it forward, pass it forward, pay it forward. People will become jealous. You'll begin to, and they won't believe it because you need carbs for energy. You need carbs to build muscle. You need fiber in your diet, etc. And then we begin to improve our health and well-being year after year after year. We begin to run faster than these runners who are carb runners. We begin to cycle harder and faster. Whatever it may be, we begin to lift more in the gym. We begin to start looking younger. All of these things over time, it sinks in. And I think through sheer grit and attrition, we'll wear them down one by one. But it does come at a price. But look, I'm fortunate enough to be surrounded. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. I was going to say it comes at a price, but I think that price is worth it because there's a couple of things that happen when you believe in something. Well, and that's part of the process is you have to believe in something enough to put yourself out there. So if you're looking to be a coach, to answer the question, if you're looking to be a coach, the first thing you have to do is really understand, am I willing to take a stand for what I believe? That's the first question, because you're going to have people who challenge your thought process, who challenge the information and challenge you. So part of the process of being a coach, and I've been coaching for a little over 12 years. And, even now there are things sometimes where I'm like, am I right? So being willing to evaluate your own belief system and the things that you've interpreted, the information that you have, but then also say, look, these are the principles, the values, and the concepts that I've established as the basis for my decisions, my protocols, my methods. Do they still work? Yes, they still work. Am I validated by this, that, or the other thing? And when someone challenges that, being able to explain and say, look, even if you don't get into a debate with someone else, being comfortable to be able to end that internal debate. Why do I believe this? Is this something that is still passionate for me and that I will still want to help people with? So being willing to go through that process, I think, is a big part of coaching. Yeah,
I think it's the why that makes you cry, mate. Do you remember?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's fantastic. Yep.
Yeah, you've got to be passionate, definitely. And I like the way that leads into the next question, because evaluating what you believe, and I think I might be out on a limb here against you two. Bishop's Deep Learning has put stretching is a scam, just like toothpaste is soap. I'm not going to get into the second part of that. Now,
why not? It's a conspiracy.
I used to be a big fan of stretching, and I have got into the science, and I am completely against stretching now. A jokey thing that one of my instructors taught me was if a tiger came into this room, you would not say to the tiger, hang on a minute, I've just got to stretch my quads. All right, you would run. So we designed that way. And when I was in soccer, and I've got an FA coaching badge, a Football Association coaching badge, more injuries happened in the warm-up than actually in the game. And it seemed like stretching actually seemed to be detrimental. And I found that with my own training. When I go into a session now, I don't stretch. So that's a complete 180 for me. And that's why that is on there. I don't think Bishop's Deep Learning has ever seen me before, but I do mention I'm not into stretching. I don't think it's good. I understand why people think it is. This is different to visualization and practicing. That's different. If you go onto the football field and you haven't kicked a ball about, you might be the sort of person that needs to do that. That needs to stand at the edge of the penalty box and have a shot into the top corners and just get your eye in. I get that. But what I'm talking about is sort of the stretching that is prescriptive. You've got to stretch before you do your workout. You've got to. And I don't think that's true necessarily. So I'd love to know, because you're both, you're both at the top of your game when it comes to training. What are your views on stretching?
Yeah, you're mostly right. I think the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of the studies and information coming out about stretching has been opposite of what I was trained initially. I was always told from the earliest I can remember is, in your warm up, you're stretching to get ready to work, right? You're getting your body ready. And that's in general, that's what a warm up is for. But the stretching should be dynamic because you're getting ready to do work. And then at the end, you're stretching to increase range of motion. You're warmed up, your synovial fluid's out, your body's all warm, you got blood pumping, you can increase range of motion at the end of the workout. And again, what a lot of the science is showing, a lot of the studies are coming out now is saying that the benefit of stretching in some cases is a net negative to performance. And in most cases, it's probably a net zero. It really doesn't make any difference from an injury perspective or performance perspective. So I would agree with you there. I do think there are some cases for stretching from a proprioception perspective for beginners, especially and building that habit of doing something. There's some people who can't work out. Right? I'm not at a point where I can spend 30 minutes a day, 45 minutes a day in the gym. I don't know what I'm doing. So, hey, maybe your initial entry into a fitness routine is 15 minutes of stretching, just moving your body, building that mind-muscle connection, learning how your body works, learning what positions there are, understanding how to move your joints in your body, that kind of thing. So I think that can be beneficial. From a general perspective of stretching, over the past few years, I've pretty much gone into your stretching should be movement focused in the work that you're doing. That's kind of where I look at. So you should be looking at getting maximal range of motion when you're doing your exercises. And that should be your stretching, because if you're doing functional movement, then your range of motion in those movements is also going to be functional. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for quality of life, mobility, and physical independence as we get older. And that means functional movement. So doing a lot of stretching just for stretching's sake, I haven't seen a lot of benefit from that in the long term. And I've seen more mobility, and that's another aspect of it. A lot of people get the word mobility confused with flexibility. Mobility is flexibility plus strength. So if you want to get range of motion and get strong in all those different positions, then there has to be some resistance or some stress in that equation. So doing the combination of range of motion while you're doing your weight training, while you're doing your exercises under stress, is going to do a lot more for you than just building flexibility.
Rich, any views?
Yeah, completely agree. I don't stretch. My warm-up before the bench press is a lighter bench press. I don't stretch before I go for a run. I go for a jog before I run. If I'm going on the bike, I'll spin at a higher cadence on the bike. So you warm up the muscle that you're getting ready to use, but I don't stretch. The research shows that stretching, especially for explosive movements, reduces the amount of power output within that movement. So if you're a sprinter and you're stretching your legs, you are losing power in your sprint. Same thing with sprinters on the bike or anything that's power related for that matter. So I don't do any stretching.
Yeah, and I would add a lot of I think there was a study I read a couple of years ago, or an article, something I read a couple of years ago about hamstring injuries in soccer, or I should say football for you guys.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is, they determined that like 80% of the injuries, or more than 80% of the injuries that are hamstring pulls in soccer, are not because of tightness, they're because of weakness. So the injuries that we've commonly attributed to not being stretched out, not being warmed up, are really not that at all. It's a weakness. It's the strength of the activity, the muscle's ability to hold its tensile strength and keep its integrity under stress. It's not that they overextended their knee, right? If you look at anybody in sports who pulls a hamstring and watch when they pull the hamstring, their knee is bent. They're not fully stretched out, right? That muscle is not at its maximum length. So it's not an issue of strength, of stretching or length of the muscle. It's an issue of strength in that muscle to hold that pressure. So if you want to avoid those types of injuries, get stronger. Don't get more flexible.
Now we've got a question. It says to Coach Stephen, I got all excited. Someone wants to know the answer from me. And the question is, do you work with older patients, 65 plus? And if so, what have you noticed from them switching carnivore? And then they added this. Sorry, I meant Coach Bronson.
Oh, man.
Thanks for that.
Love it.
So yeah, there's a question.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm always a little
absolutely.
bit facetious with these sort of questions because I say, because when they were 64, they were very, very different to when they were 65. But we're talking older populations in general over 65.
Sure. The nothing changes. It's the same. If you're 35, you're going to see benefit. If you're 65, you're going to see benefit. And they're all the same things. It's just a matter of degree. Greg Glassman, the founder of CrossFit, is quoted, and I'm going to get this quote completely wrong, but the needs of a grandmother and the needs of an Olympic athlete are the same. They just vary by degree. So we all need the same things. We need more muscle. We need less fat. We need less inflammation. We need more metabolic flexibility. We need all these things. It's the same thing we all need. So for somebody who's in their 60s, and I'll use my mom as an example. So I've been working with my mom for almost 10 years. She got started on her journey at 60 years old. Okay, I started personal training her. She joined my CrossFit gym. We started doing a bunch of stuff. She went carnivore about 4 years ago. She just turned 69. Since she went carnivore, with the combination of strength training, she's reversed osteoporosis. She's lowered. She's hypothyroid. She's lowered her thyroid medication. She's increased bone density, increased strength. Like the physical independence that she has right now at 69 years old is far and above where she was in her 40s. Okay, so her favorite thing to do is deadlift. She loves working out. When she can't work out, she gets depressed. It's absolutely amazing to see the things that have happened for her as a small frame woman who started out not doing anything her entire life. She didn't do any fitness in her life until she was 60 years old. And now we're actually having a conference next week in our area, and she's speaking on the journey and what it's been like for her to go through this process. So if you're 60s, if you're in your 50s, 60s, and 70s, and you're just getting started and you're doing carnivore, number one thing is don't get caught up in the minutia. Just keep it simple. And it really is, like you guys said, eat more meat, move your body, get more sleep. Those are the big three things. Okay. So it will make a difference if you're looking at increasing bone density, if you're looking at increasing lean mass and fighting sarcopenia, which is probably the number one thing that you need to be worried about over 60, is keeping your lean muscle as high as possible so that you can maintain physical independence. Then this is a great way to go.
Rich?
Yeah, just touching base on the sarcopenia sort of a thing there. I mean, we're told as we age that muscle wastage is a fact of life, and osteoporosis. Osteoporosis can be reversed with protein. When we look at bone is mineralized protein. That's protein and minerals. What do we consume lots of on a ketogenic carnivore lifestyle? Lots of protein and minerals. You can not only stop osteoporosis in its tracks, but you can reverse osteoporosis. And part of building bone, or the absorption of calcium within the bone, is directly correlated with the consumption of sodium. We can't send calcium into the bone without increasing sodium consumption. Again, another thing that we consume lots of within the keto carnivore community, and another thing that goes against the grain. We're told to avoid consuming high amounts of sodium. Sodium is essential for life. Protein is essential. Cholesterol and fats, are essential for life. So age, just a number. And I think, you guys have all shown that. I'm a little bit younger than the two of you, but I'm nearly 40. And I'd like to think that I don't look it. No comments, please.
No, you look about 50.
But, yeah, thanks for that.
Well, come on, 7.5 hours.
7 hours and 3/4, and I think we're absolutely flying, to be honest. I mean, we've been non-stop.
I was joking.
And I'm still feeling full of energy. My bum isn't dead yet.
I've been standing.
You've been fair play. So I may have to do some standing a little bit later on, but it must be all this transitioning from bodybuilding into cycling. This hardened my bum, because I'm still going strong, but age is just a number.
Yeah, I want to add to that, and that is, if I can remember, because that question just popped up, and now I totally forgot what I wanted to talk about. Don't you hate when you have a thought on your head? You have a thought, and you're like, oh man.
Yeah.
We talked about, amino acids and protein is required for building muscle and bone, right? That is one aspect. But even for bone, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, is your body still needs a stimulus in order to make the change happen. You have to tell your central nervous system, you have to tell your body, I'm doing more than I've done before. So now that you're getting all this extra protein, here's what I want you to do with it. Okay, and that goes for muscle growth. We have to stimulate the muscle so that our body says, hey, we need to add more muscle fiber. We need to add density. We need to add myofibrils, whatever it is. But the same thing happens for bone density. If you're not stressing the bone structure is not going to grow. It's not going to get stronger. So resistance training is also a requirement for reversing sarcopenia. You've got to get your body, put some stress on your bones, move some weight.
Absolutely.
And this doesn't have to be lifting weights, does it? I mean, this could be body weight exercises,
Absolutely.
banded exercises.
Yep.
We're not talking about, you don't have to hit the gym if that's something that you're, fearful of. You can do these exercises at home, plain and simply, and you don't have to do an awful lot. We think that from the days of, the bodybuilders like Arnold Schwarzenegger and things, spending 4 or 5 hours in the gym, anything beyond an hour, in my opinion, is negative. 45 minutes to me is optimal because we raise cortisol. Cortisol is catabolic. Get in the gym or at home, do your body weighted exercises, do your band exercise, whatever it may be. You don't have to do an awful lot to stimulate the muscle protein synthesis. But yeah, completely agree.
And the thing is, you're evidently sort of into the high performance athletic arena, but I just want to add a little much broader statement that any improvement on your health is good. So if you can't get out of a chair, okay, getting out of a chair is an intense exercise for you, all right?
Yes, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, you can be sitting in a chair, and I actually had this, a woman with a Zimmer frame sitting in a chair, and she said, this is really sad, sorry, maybe I'm getting emotional. And she said to me, my world has just shrunk. I can remember her saying, the NHS have given up on me and my world is just these 4 walls. Absolutely pitiful. Lovely woman, bright, wrote poetry for a local magazine and all this sort of stuff. Well, 6 months later, she's not got the Zimmer frame. She was bent over like this. She was straight now, walking out into the garden, to the point where you'll both get this, because I'm sure you've had people like this that you've coached. Well, I want to walk to the end of the street. This is the person that couldn't even get out of a chair,
Yep.
So your horizons start to get better. The oldest, and that was a very old person, that was in their 70s. The oldest person I've actually trained and seen a remarkable difference to was 89. And he came to me. I do rehab in this room as well, with a little bit of spinal manipulation, all this sort of stuff. Anyway, he came in and his son had to bring him in. He was old school. He didn't want to take painkillers. He had a handkerchief in his mouth because he was in that much pain and basically could hardly get out of his car. So anyway, a little bit of manipulation, talk about diet, stuff like that. 6 months later, I'm walking in the park with my wife, Jane, and I said, look, that's Doug. That's that client. No cane. Bolt upright, walking in the park, 90, right? And I said to him, whoa, Doug, it's me, Stephen, remember? Bright as a button. Yeah, you sorted my back out. I went, yeah, okay. What you been doing? And he said, oh, it's my 90th birthday yesterday, and I've just played 9 holes of golf. Right?
That's awesome.
So you haven't got to look like a bag of walnuts. You haven't got to look like that. We're just talking daily functions, a little bit extra if you want to, walking in the park, walking your dog, enjoying the beach. All of that is exercise. It's movement. It's living, it's being out.
It's living. And that's the thing that I want everyone to understand is the fitness routine that you develop for yourself, or the things that you start doing to improve your fitness, should be based on the vision you have for how you want your life to look, right? If you just want to be able to go for a walk, play with your grandkids, and do some gardening without feeling like crap, then do the things that make that easy. You don't need to worry about going and running a 5K. You don't need to worry about lifting 300 pounds. You don't need to do all this stuff. What can I do? I want my life to be walking with my husband or my spouse, playing with my grandkids and gardening 3 days a week, what do I need to do? I need to walk. I need to learn how to get up and down off the floor with no problem. And then I need to figure out how I can do the things outside for gardening. What are the things that requires, and make those things easy. It's about taking the things that are limiting you and slowly removing them from your life. It doesn't have to be this giant expectation of what you see on Instagram or what you see you, me, or anyone else doing. It's 100% based on what life do you want to live.
Yes, that's great. Now, this name, Primal Mike.
Primal. I know, so Mike.
It's Primal Mike, and he's got raw in the middle of his name, which is very clever. To put on weight, in brackets, mostly muscle, on Carnivore, is there a protein limit above which there is a diminishing result in muscle build rate, and I should increase fat instead? Great question.
Okay. Yes, there's always a point where you're going to get more than you need. The process of finding that, if you want a rough number from what I've seen, and maybe this is something you guys can corroborate, or maybe you've seen something different, somewhere around 1.2 to 1.25 grams per pound of lean mass is about where I've seen people max out on what they need in order to get optimal growth. Anything above 1.25 is probably too much. Too much in meaning it's not really doing much for you. And I think there's some studies. I think Menno Henselman had some stuff out where he did a meta-analysis about that. I think it was around 1.2 as well. Basically, you want to find what I call your protein threshold. Start at a number. And I like to start people at 1 gram per pound of lean mass. So if you weigh 200 pounds, you're 25% body fat, you want to get in 150 grams of protein per day. Start there. Am I gaining? Am I losing? Is my performance good? How am I getting stronger? Whatever performance metrics you want to have if you're trying to build muscle, build athletic performance. If you feel like, okay, I'm good, but I think I could do better, go to 1.1, 1.15, something like that. Slowly bump it up till you get to a point where even if I keep going higher, nothing is improving faster. And then you can bring it back down and try to find that thing. So it's a process of experimentation. Add a little bit, see if you notice a difference. If you're not noticing a difference, you can bring it back down, and just playing with those numbers. But again, on average, I think it's about 1.2 to 1.25 is what I've seen for most people.
You can ask me, you're on mute, Steve.
Rich, you must have something to say.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that seems like a sensible number. I mean, looking at the research that I've carried out over the years, 0.5 is minimum to maintain. Around 0.82 grams is what's required to build. 1 gram per pound, which Coach Bronson mentioned, is what I generally tell people, which is what we mentioned earlier. Around 1 gram per pound for men, around 0.9 for women. I'm considerably higher than that, being carnivore. But yeah, that makes perfect sense. About what 1.25 sounds about right. I would say that's perfect. Start with 1 gram per pound. It's nice and simple. And exactly as Coach Bronson says, if you weigh 150 pounds, that's 150 grams of protein. I wouldn't be fearful of going over protein. The fear of gluconeogenesis pulling you from a ketogenic state is a myth. That's not going to happen. We can go into more detail in that if you want to, but don't fear your protein. Do not fear your fat. We need protein and fat to increase muscle protein synthesis. We can build muscle with just protein alone. We need leucine to activate mTOR, around 3 grams, give or take. But carbohydrates do not further increase muscle protein synthesis at all. So the co-ingestion of carbs does not increase muscle protein synthesis when adequate protein is consumed. But protein with fat does increase muscle protein synthesis. So a ketogenic carnivore lifestyle will build muscle quicker than protein and carbs. So look at nature. Nature provides us with everything that we need, the perfectly packaged present, if you like. Protein combined with fat. Sorry, it's the bell my end. Yes. An egg is protein and fat. A steak is protein and fat. Chicken with the skin on is protein and fat. Eat food as nature intended. And, people will come back and when I've built the muscle, what about building or cutting down on body fat and maintaining this lean mass? Then it's a case of experimenting and reducing the body fat, the dietary fat ever so slightly. The less dietary fat we consume, the more body fat that we're going to to burn or utilize for fuel. There is no figure with this. Everybody is independent and individual, and you have to find that number for yourself. But around 1 gram per pound is a perfect place to start. I'll leave you chat on a second while I go find out who's ringing the bell there. Sorry, apologies.
And I would add to that is the other thing too is what is the impetus for putting on weight? Mike is asking this about weight and should he increase fat if the protein isn't working. There are some cases where overall weight is needed. I deal with a lot of women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who have been starving themselves for 30 years, and they're at a great body fat percentage. They're super lean, but they're 15, 20 pounds underweight because they just have not been feeding themselves enough for so long. So when I look at them and say, you need to increase your protein and your fat, their head explodes because they're like, well, but I don't want to gain any weight. Well, guess what? You need to gain weight. So we're upping your fat and your protein because you need more fat and you need more muscle. So that is a case. Most people really don't need to worry about gaining overall weight. They just need to gain lean mass. So that's just something to be mindful of.
Yes, brilliant. Now he's away, we could talk about him, but let's not do that. Right. So all capitals. So should I shout this one? AKA Zinsomniac. Right. Okay. Yeah. Question. My mum has arterial fibrillation.
AFib.
Can she do the Carno diet?
Yes, absolutely. Just it's a little bit different. It's a lot more experimentation with electrolytes and activity and the things that you have to do. But in general, I haven't seen anybody that has AFib that hasn't been able to do it.
Excellent. We're coming to the end of your hour, but I'm trying to get these questions in. There you are. Yeah, there's Richard is back, which is great. Who was at the door?
It was my wife. So I'm in the shop. So this is where I do. Yeah. So she's busy. So the shop is closed today, but she's busy working as always. I mean, when you work for yourself, I don't think there's ever a day off, is it? We work 7 days a week. So she locked herself out. She was emptying the bin and the door closed behind us.
So
yeah, it's super exciting.
Bishop's Deep Learning, who has got a few questions through, which there you go. Coach Bronson, do you get resistance towards eating only meat from your clients, and how do you handle this?
No, I don't force anything. So there's a sustainability, and meeting somebody where they're at is always more important than getting someone to do something the way that I do it. So there's the principles and the concepts that we talked about before. The principles of what makes carnivore successful is the goal. So carnivore is successful because it eliminates processed food, it eliminates seed oils, it eliminates carbs, it eliminates the sugar. It does all these things, right? So taking all those things out is part of the process. The level at which we do those things to start somebody out may be different. So I may have someone come in who's completely, oh no, not Dr. Sarah.
Hi.
I may have someone who's coming in who's completely standard American diet, where if I go to them and say, hey, we're going to switch you overnight from SAD to carnivore, they're going to quit day one. So for them, it may be, let's get the first principle in line and let's say, hey, let's just stop eating bread out of a box or a bag. If it's processed, that's step number one. And then go from there over a period of time and understanding that this is a process. And maybe it's not even doing any of that. Maybe it's keep eating everything that you're currently eating. Let's just increase the amount of red meat that you have. So everyone's going to be different, but we're trying to get people to understand and follow the principles and the concepts of why these things work, not fit within a specific methodology or protocol.
Brilliant. Coach Bronson and Dr. Sarah Zaldivar. Yeah, I've got her name right. You know each other. You were both on the Reverse TV series. Just while you're swapping the baton, if that's okay, and we've got you both here. Firstly, Dr. Sarah, do you know Richard?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I had him over on my YouTube channel. It was one of the best interviews ever. Yeah. I loved it.
Besides
you need
mine.
to do round two. Of course. Yeah.
the reverse thing that you were both on. I mean, do you want to share something about doing that? Did you think it was worthwhile? And have you seen a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go real quick. I think first of all, getting to meet Dr. Sarah was fantastic. So that was very fun. For me, I think the biggest thing about Reversed was outside of my personal experience of getting to meet all these people and getting to build those relationships, which was fantastic. But just seeing that, much like what I just said, where it's about concepts and principles, we all have our own little nuances, our own context, our own backgrounds and experiences that make us talk about things differently than each other. But that's what makes this powerful. And I wanted to say this earlier, Stephen, when you were talking about, can we talk 24 hours about just eat meat? Yes, we can, because it's not about eating meat. It's about relating to other people and all the different stories that we all have that bring people to what it means to eat meat. So it's not eating meat isn't the message of this 24 hours. The message of this 24 hours is that no matter who you are and where you come from, this can help you move forward. And that's probably the biggest thing that I got is, I eat a little, I have some things that Dr. Sarah and I probably don't agree on. There's some things that Kelly Hogan and there's some things that Dr. Barry or Dr. Kiltz or Dr. Chafee or Bella or Emily, who you had on earlier, all these different people, we have little nuances and things that we do differently, but it all comes down to eat meat, don't eat crap, move your body, and get sleep. Right? Those are the four main things. If you do those things, 90% of your problems are going to go away.
Absolutely. What about you, Dr. Sarah?
Yeah, I likewise, Coach Bronson. Like, I just was so happy to meet everybody in person because I had interviewed pretty much everybody there. Like, we knew one another digitally, and so to see them in person was really cool. And everybody was so kind and friendly and uplifting. And so it was really my first time actually meeting everybody in person. So that was really, really fun, and it exceeded my expectations. And then just the fact that we got together in the first ever show on carnivore diets is something huge, I think. And hopefully this will mark the beginning of more to come, just bigger, better, more carnivore programming so that we reach the whole world. I mean, imagine the diseases that we can reverse, imagine the lives that we can impact if we remember our species specific diet,
Brilliant. So Coach Bronson, thank you for doing your hour shift. Much appreciated. The lovely Dr. Sarah.
Appreciate it. Pleasure to meet you.
Absolutely. Thanks. Nice meeting you guys. And next time I got to do like 2 or 3 hours. This was not long enough.
Do you know, when I came up with this stupid idea, I thought, 24 hours, how are we going to fill that? And honestly, we could have done this for 3 days, couldn't we, Rich, already?
Yeah,
for sure.
Chafee didn't really want to go. Dr. Kiltz has already been on. I can come back if you want. Seriously, the questions, it's amazing. So that's really, really great. So yeah, so thank you for doing it, and we'll definitely do something again.
Thank you, Coach.
Hey, Dr. Sarah, take it easy on him, all right?
I'll try.
All right, see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, man.
That's fine. So, Dr. Sarah Zaldivar, for those that don't know you, would you like to give yourself a little introduction?
Sure. So I'm a nutrition professor at Miami-Dade College. I am a classically trained dietitian. So I grew up in Lebanon. I got my bachelor's and my master's in nutrition and dietetics over there. And I did, the whole year-long internship, being brainwashed into the high-carb, low-fat guidelines, and, became a licensed dietitian. And then I flew to Miami and I got my doctorate from the University of Miami in exercise physiology and nutrition. And I spent 5 years out of that doctorate researching and doing my dissertation on sugar addiction. And I did that for, 5 years between literature review and, collecting the data and then defending the dissertation. And even with that, I was still in denial with regards to the addiction. I literally wrote a keto dessert cookbook after I defended my dissertation on sugar addiction. So that was like the academic background. I also worked with the American College of Sports Medicine, and they so basically they hired me in order to train potential personal trainers to become certified with the ACSM, which is the hardest one to get. So I would conduct like intensive 3-day workshops, teaching the basics of what are the things you got to do in order to pass that exam from the first try, because the passing rate was pretty low. So, I've taught for ACSM. I've taught at the University of Miami, at Miami-Dade College, DeVry University, nutrition courses and also exercise physiology courses. And all throughout that whole period of time, I am also struggling with binge eating, sugar addiction. I've struggled with weight all my life. And so eventually, through enough personal research, realized that everything I was taught was wrong. And so I did keto. And after 7 days of keto, I felt like my brain came back online, and that's when I was sold. And I was doing keto for anxiety first. It wasn't even for body composition. And then I realized, like, wait a second, I started dropping weight like crazy. I was like, okay. And then from there, though, I still struggled with binge eating. And every time I would go through an episode like that, I would, as a reaction to that episode, to try and prevent that from happening in the future, I would watch more podcasts on the topic. I would go buy books. I would do research on PubMed and Google, like Google Scholar and all of like scientific, like whichever place I could get my hands on data, I was doing that. So I became like the master researcher. I mean, I've always been a nerd. Like I've always I wouldn't even, they wouldn't make me do my final exams throughout school because I was always at the top of my class. I was like, she doesn't need to do her final exams. We know she's just gonna do well. So it's like, for me, collecting information and nerding out came easy to me. And so, but still, even with that, it took like thousands of hours, I would say, of like so many books and so many podcasts and so many articles reading until finally it clicked for me. And I realized that everything I thought I was taught was wrong. And then keto wasn't enough, and addiction is real, and there are plant toxins, and carnivore is our species specific diet. And it's been a long journey basically. And hopefully what I try to do is try to bridge that gap and try to help my students at Miami-Dade and also my clients, try to get them from point A to point B in like a few months, as opposed to decades, which is what it actually took me.
Fabulous. That's a fabulous introduction. I think that's the best one we've had so far, Richard. But I'm not really allowed to say that because every guest has been fabulous.
The best. Sure. Hashtag the best. I'll take it. Don't you dare take that away from me.
I couldn't take that away from you after you saying that my interview was the best that you've ever done. So yeah, I agree.
Right. There you go. Oh, wow. I knew what I was doing.
That's recorded, so that's going on air. I'm reusing that and repurposing that again and again.
So we had some questions submitted beforehand. Yeah. Excuse my bad reading, but this one is from Jenny, who's been carnivore 5 months, cut out dairy recently, and she's asked, can she eat ground beef and eggs long term and get all the nutrients that she needs?
Yeah, I think we have enough people doing that for decades, and they're thriving, to know that, yeah, you totally can. It's a good idea, just because we don't have thousands of people that have been studies and randomized control trials, or like, very high quality scientific studies. We don't have this data just yet because nobody has bothered to study our species specific diet for some reason. It's a good idea to just get a nutrient panel just to see where you're at. I know that Michaela Peterson was doing a lion diet for a very long time, and it turns out like folate levels were low. But even with that, like, I would see and look for symptoms as opposed to just having the blood test marker. So you could get those labs, check for symptoms, or you can just, to be on the safe side, take organ supplements, or if you do enjoy eating organs, you could do that. But we know, and I think we all in this community have a very good knowledge of so many people who are doing, just meat and eggs for decades, and no nutrient deficiencies, no scurvy. And if anything, it's not like they're not dying, they're actually thriving. So, and it would make sense, right? It is our species specific diet. That is the diet that we ate for 99.99% of our existence as a species here on Earth.
Yeah, it's cool. Rich, have you got something to add to that?
Yeah. Do you mind if I share my screen?
No, of course. You can share your screen.
Let me see if I can do this again now, because it took me a bit of thing last time, didn't it?
It worked earlier, mate.
There we are.
Oh, by the way, that question's so good. Sean Baker's coming on in a couple of hours, and I'm going to ask him that very basic question, because I think that was a great answer, Dr. Sarah. And I might actually ask a few people that, because there is that common worry. I'm giving you some time, by the way, Rich, while you sort your screen.
I'm ready. I think you right. Need to okay the screen, do you? It's sharing my end, but it's ready to go whenever you are.
Yeah, I think that's all I was going to say was a lot of people worry about not getting enough nutrients. Yeah. Strange when they're on this processed, sad diet that's depleted of anything. Right. So let's get your screen share.
So two slides to this. One is taken from the Sacred Cow book by oh my goodness, I can't remember her name. And the other is from Paul Saladino's book, The Carnivore Code. Now, if you look at the amino profile on the left, instantly we can see the amino profile is far superior in animal proteins compared to plant proteins. And the slide on the right, where we look at blueberries and kale compared to animal proteins, in the case of ribeye, beef liver, fish roe, and an egg yolk. Just by looking at that slide on the right-hand side, we can instantly see that there's a massive increase in micronutrients in every aspect. And when we break it down, I mean, we look at vitamin A. Vitamin A does not exist in plants. I think we covered this in our talk, didn't we, when I was on with you, Sarah? No vitamin A in plants. Plants contain beta-carotene, which is a precursor. It needs to be acted upon by an enzyme called BCMO to convert it into the active form of retinol. So no vitamin A. B vitamin's incredibly low. Cobalamin does not exist in plants. Contrary to popular belief, vitamin C does exist in animal proteins. Vitamin D you cannot get from plants. You get this from the sun and from animal proteins. Vitamin K does not exist in plants. Kale is touted as being a good source of vitamin K, but kale does not contain any active form of vitamin K. The human body needs vitamin K2. Kale contains vitamin K1, and then choline, creatine, carnosine, carnitine, taurine, all these other things that we can only get from animal proteins. Every vitamin and mineral that we need, not just to survive, but thrive, is found in animal proteins. So there we are. That's my
beautiful 30 slide. Seconds. I love it.
Yeah, fantastic. And what that presentation also highlights further on is when we remove these plant foods that are high in lectins and phytic acid, we actually absorb more of the nutrients. So when we become carnivore, not only are we getting more nutrients, but the body's absorbing way more of them as well. But yeah, that's a super short slide or presentation in regards to the nutrient dense from animal proteins.
Popeyes, we all grew up watching it. I know I grew up watching Popeyes cartoons, and he's downing the spinach, and it makes him so strong for all the iron. And it's like, no, you actually absorb almost none of the iron because of the high oxalate content in the in the spinach, and that's
Popeye was wrong. Popeye was wrong.
And he was very wrong. And that's why he was pulled off the air. Are they still making it? I don't know.
I haven't seen Popeye for quite some time. No, exactly. We need heme iron, which we can only get from animal proteins. Spinach is incredibly high in oxalates. I think sort of around, by memory, one pack of spinach in the UK is 200 milligrams. 200 grams, of spinach, which contains around 1,500 milligrams of oxalates. 5,000 milligrams of oxalates has been known to kill people. So, what do? We take this package of spinach, we chuck it into a blender, and we mix it up with turmeric, which is also high in oxalates.
Right.
Yeah, this turmeric
That's what
and spinach.
So Liam Hemsworth is a celebrity here in the United States, and I'm sure you probably know him too. He's like a famous actor, and he went vegan. Him and he was married at a time with Miley Cyrus, and they were both vegan. Both eventually had to stop because Miley Cyrus, and I quote what she said on the Joe Rogan podcast, she had to stop because, and I quote, her brain stopped working. And the moment she started adding omega-3s in the form of fish, like it was like as if the brain came back online. And for him, he had to stop because he had kidney stones, because he was starting every day with a shake with the almond milk and the spinach. And it was thinking, oh, that's like the healthiest start to my day. And it gave him really painful kidney stones that required surgery. So,
yeah.
I've got Sorry, I've got another question. What I've learned, by the way, sorry, Sarah, is we've got so many questions and we end up not getting everyone that's bothered to go online.
Go for the questions.
Just going to stick this in. Now, I actually find this quite an interesting question because most of them are pretty positive. This one's sort of maybe not so positive. Dr. Sarah, why does it seem that most carnivores keep slipping up and can't stick to the diet? And before you answer, I'm going to say that's not my experience, actually. I find most people can stick to it.
Actually, a lot of people can't. I mean, pretty much everybody that comes to me is because they can't stick to carnivore. And it's because of the addiction. And while I do think that you have a much higher rate of success on a carnivore diet because it's a sober meal plan, it doesn't have anything addictive in it, no carbs. And if you don't do too much dairy, it's not as addictive. It's actually the least addictive food on the planet is a carnivore diet, especially when you exclude the dairy. So it is a little bit higher with success rate just because if we're going to follow it, you're not going to be constantly taking the drug in the form of sweets or artificial sweeteners or piece of bread. Even bread lights up the dopamine centers or those addictive centers in the brain. So it does have a slightly higher rate of success, but the addiction is still there. And so people can do it and they feel great and they don't have cravings, but then they don't realize that they still harbor that addiction. And so when they let go a little bit of the control or of the motivation of that comes from trying something for the first time, it's like, I just discovered carnivore, I'm so excited. You got that momentum, you got all the dopamine coming from this novelty factor. Eventually, after a month, or most commonly between like 1 month to 90 days, 1 month to 3 months, is when most people kind of let their guard down a little bit and they go to a wedding or a birthday or something happens and they think to themselves, what's one slice of cake? It's not the end of the world. And before you know it, the next day they're having and they're craving more sugars, more carbs, and they don't realize what just happened. They don't realize that they just relapsed because they're not even thinking from an addiction point of view, right? Hey, Ayana, hi. So if you're not fully aware of what you're dealing with, you're not treating it with the respect. You're not treating the drug foods with the respect that they deserve. And so you're too casual about it. And this is what ends up happening. And so this is why what I've been working with recently is kind of revisiting really my dissertation and the thing that I specialized in and realizing like that is the answer. And basically fixing that dopamine deficit that everybody comes into carnivore with. And even if you're not a carnivore, like most people who are struggling with their weight is because of that dopamine deficit. Because every time you engage in a drug, whether it's a food drug, remember, sweet taste has been shown in multiple studies to be far more addictive than heroin, not just cocaine. Like the cocaine studies are old now. It's like it's more addictive than heroin. So like, yeah, you stand no chance if you don't know what you're dealing with. And so if you've dabbled with drugs like sweetness or real sugar or fake sugar or alcoholism, any kind of drug, it all does the same thing. It destroys the dopamine centers in the brain. Specifically, it destroys the dopamine receptors in the brain. Because for you to feel good and have energy and be productive and not have cravings, you got to release dopamine in your brain, and the dopamine has to attach to its receptor called a D2 receptor on the cell surface of your adjacent brain cell. And so when you have that dopamine attaching to D2 receptors, it's like a lock and key situation. Once the attachment happens is when you feel amazing, perfect memory, mental clarity, zero cravings. Every time you have a craving, it just means you're feeling what a dopamine deficit feels like. You're low on dopamine in that state. And so the craving is not for the cookie or the cake or the drug. The craving is really to get a dopamine hit. Or it could be, you can even get it from social media. You can get it from so many different areas. And so what I work with is, yeah, Carnivore is a great sober meal plan. But what I'm more focused on is optimizing and fixing that dopamine deficit. I want to fix it. And then why just stay here? Why don't we optimize our dopamine? Why don't we raise our baseline level of dopamine? Because now all of a sudden my clients, they're not just losing weight, they're losing weight and getting sober, but also making more money, having more confidence, setting boundaries. It becomes easier to confront people when you need to confront them. People respect you. They treat you differently when you're operating at a high dopamine baseline, because they can sense. It's kind of like the how you have like alpha and beta in any interaction. That's kind of equivalent to how much dopamine that person has. The more alpha you are, the more dopamine you have. The more beta you are, the less dopamine you have. And people can sense it when they're around you, when they're interacting with you, when they're in the room with you. And so they're less likely to treat you negatively or poorly because they know you're tough and you're not gonna take that. And so their whole lives transform because we're dealing with the root cause of so many things. So the weight gain is just a symptom of a dopamine deficit. Not making enough money is just a symptom of a dopamine deficit. Having anxiety and depression is a symptom of that dopamine deficit. Having, poor memory is a symptom. Not being productive is a symptom of a dopamine deficit. And so when we tackle the dopamine deficit, and I like to do it with exercise, intense exercise, it's a very, very different type of exercise. I'm not talking about, doing like walking for 5 hours. That's not what I'm talking about. When we do that, then we optimize dopamine centers, and every single area of your life is going to be maximized, and you can determine how high you want to be in every other area, because the fitter you get, the more dopamine you have. Every other area now is also improved.
Rich, have you got anything to add?
Me unmute that. No, Sarah has hit everything on the nail there. I mean, it comes back to what we mentioned earlier about the catecholinergic neurotransmitter synthesis. The body's ability to create these neurotransmitters comes from the food we eat, specific cofactors like zinc, iron, magnesium, vitamin B12, etc. When these are negated by certain foods that we consume, then dopamine is no longer produced, and we are hardwired to chase dopamine. So if we are not getting it through our diet, from natural sources, then we're trying to get it from other sources, and this is why we crave sugar things. This is why food addiction is a real thing, and this is why we end up binge eating. And as Sarah elegantly said, that a piece of bread is still sugar. It could be pasta. It doesn't have to be a chocolate bar, candy bar. It could be a bowl of pasta, rice. It could be a bowl of vegetables even. But this is why I believe that a vegan lifestyle isn't optimal. We're not getting the vitamin B12, the iron. We're not getting. What does a vegan and vegetarian consume? Lots of, it's lots of lectins and phytic acid, which is blocking the absorption of zinc, iron, and magnesium. This is leading to depression, anxiety, and we know from studies that vegans have a higher rate of depression and anxiety, higher suicide rate, I believe, as well. We need to be eating meat. This isn't a fight against, we have the same interests. We care, you brought your dog on earlier. We are animal lovers. I care for the condition of the animal that I'm going to eat. I don't want to see cows in sheds, contained and fed grain. I want them roaming, the countryside and living a happy life. we all want the same thing, but it comes back down to the foods that we eat and the neurotransmitter signals in the brain, and what we consume massively affects that. It keeps coming back down to the same thing. There's a reoccurring message here, isn't it? That everything comes back down to what we put in. What we put in is what we get out. Your diesel car doesn't run so well on petrol and vice versa. So I think hit that purely on the head. Yeah, fantastic.
Love it. And yeah, like you said, the more you love animals, the more you should eat meat, because you actually end up killing off 25 times more sentient or emotion feeling animals to feed a plant-based or vegetarian or vegan diet. When you're harvesting the soy and the wheat and the corn, the sheer amount of animals that are sacrificed, brutally murdered, because inadvertently, just in order to produce this food, is just shocking. And they've actually done a study on that. It was published. I did a YouTube video on it, and you can check that out. And there's a direct link to the paper. 25 times more sentient animals are definitely not humanely murdered. So which do you want to save more lives? And if so, all you need is literally red meat and you're good.
And vegans and vegetarians also eat a lot of mushrooms. Mushrooms are sentient beings. They're one of the most intelligent species on the planet. Yet, they'll happily consume a mushroom. A lot of people don't understand that. But as a little piece of information I learned from a gentleman we've got coming on later, Sean Sako-Sakanovsky. He taught me that one during a podcast. Incredible piece of advice. But yeah, they're quick enough to eat mushrooms. Mushrooms are sentient beings. So
is that why they say they're fun guys?
just like you and I.
Why would you want to kill fun guys? Just kill the boring ones.
Exactly.
So a nice question that's got the zeitgeist here, Dr. Sarah. Based on your experience in nutrition research, do you see the tide turning in favor of low carb diets in recent years?
I think we've shamed the American Heart Association and some of those, and the American Diabetes Association. We've just so publicly shamed them to the point where they're trying to weasel their way back into low carb. They're not doing it willingly. It's like grabbing a child that's throwing a tantrum and like dragging them into to see the light. And so that's what's happening. It's just they're just so closely aligned with the food companies. That's the problem. And so their paycheck and their funding dollars and their jobs rely on keeping those large food companies happy. And what is the thing that sells the most? Drugs, sugar, and carbs, right? There's a reason why the food companies can make so much money. It's easy to make money when you're dealing with highly addictive foods in broad daylight without any checks or balances, and hooking children where their brains are still developing from a very young age. And nobody says a word, right? We regulate smoking, but when it comes to sweetness that's far more addictive than heroin, it's okay to feed it to a 2-year-old, It's okay to go to school, the preschool, and give them all the candy and the sugar. And so, the food companies are literally addicting the population from a very young age, which makes the vast majority of people have a very hard time reversing decades and decades of addiction. Age of onset of a drug use is a very strong determinant of whether or not you can get sober from that drug. And so what is the age of onset with sugar? Some are like 1 year of age. When I was 2 or 3 months old, I was given condensed milk, which is all sugar and cream and milk, condensed milk instead of breast milk for a whole month straight, until my mom found out, because she had to leave me. Lebanon was in a civil war. She had to leave me for a year or so with my grandma, and so I wouldn't have the formula when she left. And so I was given condensed milk. It's like, oh, she'll take the condensed milk. That'll shut her up. It's like, and here we are, 36 years later.
Yes, absolutely. Rich, do you want to add? Feel free to dive in. Do you think? I mean, you sell supplements, right? So have you seen a tide turning? Do you see more people coming to you for keto and carnivore products?
Again, I mean, you and I do these free lives every week. We don't get paid for them. We do the public speaking events. We put an awful lot of effort into spreading the word, and I think it is working. People, the average person in the high street now knows what keto and carnivore are. 5 years ago, you would stop 10 people in the street and you'd be lucky if one knew what keto was. I think what they think it is and what it actually is are two different things. I mean, they still view it as a diet and they don't understand what it is. So there's a big education piece, and in there lies the problem. And it's through episodes like this that I think we're going to get that out there, that, ketosis. And again, just to reiterate a point we've made previously, if you are carnivore, you were in the metabolic state of ketosis. Carnivore and keto are the same thing. They're just different subsections of the same metabolic state. And that seems to be a big bugbear within the community. I'm keto, I'm carnivore. It's one and the same. It's just you're in a different group, a different subsection of the same thing. But it's a metabolic state. It's our natural metabolic state. It's the metabolic state we're born in, and it's the metabolic state we've evolved in our entire existence. And when we understand that we're living in this natural metabolic state that heals and repairs the body, then we can move forward. But unfortunately, we are constantly up against it. For every piece of information that is published in regards to the benefits of protein and the benefits of saturated fats and cholesterol, the Sugar Association will release another one to say that eating Kellogg's cornflakes is essential for to start your day. The study you referenced earlier, but it is increasing. It's certainly getting out there, and I'm quite shocked, to be honest. Sometimes I get customers and clients who come into the shop, and I'm astounded by the level of their knowledge and understanding in regards to some of the things that we speak about. So it is the tide is definitely turning. How and when that impacts. So, you and I are members of the Public Health Collaboration. We work with doctors and nurses from the medical community. We are trying to spread that word as part of the Public Health Collaboration, and it is spreading. Dr. David Unwin and Jen Unwin, who are guests on next, I believe, they are predominant figures within that, and and they're pushing and pushing this within the community, as we all are. It is turning. When will it be accepted? Who knows? But I think, as Sarah, quite elegantly said, that at some point the banks have got to burst. We are flooding it with this information, and it's only a matter of time, I think, until something will give. But when that happens, I don't know. Let's just hope it's sooner rather than later. You can't help but feel that there's an underlying thing going on behind the scenes. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but it all seems to be there's a machine here to keep us sick.
Yeah, you're not, Richard. I mean, it's demonstrable. You can see that big pharma and big food do not want you to eat this way because it stops their profits. I don't think that's going to get my channel shut down saying that. I think that's absolutely obvious. I do. It's just obvious. And I think it's not going to come top down. It's going to come from the bottom up. And the tide is turning. But it's people that are going to accept it. I tell you, a big food is never going to accept it. It's not going to be in the mainstream media. But then that legacy media is defunct, really. Most people get their news from this sort of thing. So, and yes, obviously YouTube tried to shut down discussion and stuff like that. But in the end, they've got to make money. And if the views go down, and if people only look at, Sarah's videos, your videos, Sean's, Chafe's, Dr. Kilt's, everybody's videos, if they're getting traction and advertisers are advertising on there, that it's where the money is. I mean, it's where the money is, and the legacy media is just, Anyway, let's not rant. Let's keep it nice and light. 24-hour live stream. We've got H. Young's question here. I'd like to start by just giving a little bit of context, and then I'll hand over to Dr. Sarah. Any research on dialysis patients on carnivore? If we look globally at dialysis machines before carnivore, let's be honest, carnivore is not a very big way of eating at the moment. Neither is low carb. I think Ken Berry actually looked into the numbers. Dialysis centers where he lives and around the area, there was something like 8 in the 1950s, something like 12 in the 60s and 70s. Now there's about 20,000. This is off the top of my head. It's a huge growth industry and business. I'm sorry, we're talking health, but it is a business. and dialysis is, they're making money out of these patients. That's a really horrible thing to think of, but that's a reality. I seem to remember Dr. Chafee at the beginning talked about somebody coming off dialysis because of carnivore. So I know that's an N=1, but this is also one of the things that bugs me a bit, because if you've got an N=1 and I've got an N=1 and you've got an N=1 and everybody's got an N=1, well, that's actually data, isn't it? That's not an anecdote. If I got 500 clients and they've all got better and 250 have reversed type 2 diabetes, that's reality. That's data. So anyway, right, that's my little bit. I'm going to take a back seat. Any views on dialysis on carnivore?
Yeah, well, no, thank you for the little background. What is the #1 cause of kidney failure? It's type 2 diabetes, right? Now, unfortunately, if you get to a point where you've damaged your nephrons, your kidney cells so much where they cannot handle now the metabolism of protein, because you have to digest protein, you break it down into amino acids. To utilize the amino acids, in a lot of cases, you would have to remove the amino group, which is like that nitrogen atom that's part of the amino acids. And so that deamination reaction leads to nitrogen being converted into ammonia right away, NH3, which is highly toxic. So the kidneys have to come in very quickly and they have to convert it. Actually, the liver does that, but it has to convert it into a less toxic form. So it turns the ammonia into urea, which is a less toxic form of nitrogen waste product from protein metabolism. So it's a lot of work, and then the kidneys have to release that urea excreted. And so the more protein you eat, it is true that your kidneys have more work to do, because they have to excrete more of the urea because you have more nitrogen coming in. And so if you got to a point where your kidneys no longer have that ability, now you need regenerative treatments. In some cases, you could be lucky enough that your body regenerates itself just by removing plant foods, if the cause was some autoimmune reaction, and you remove that and the cells can regenerate. But it's really hard to say that this is going to be the norm, because it really depends on how far along you are, how much damage you have to your nephrons, and whether and what the actual cause of the kidney failure was. It just high carb content for a long period of time? Is it an autoimmune reaction? Are you reacting to certain foods? Are you, there could be so many different causes which can determine whether the diet alone can reverse this the end stage kidney disease or not. So it gets harder the further you are in any kind of condition, the harder it gets to say with complete certainty, like, yeah, you can reverse it. Even with type 2 diabetes, like type 2 diabetes is very easily reversed in the beginning, but if you've had it for 30 years, then you start having so many things that happen because of that it's like it's not enough to just eat red meat now. You have to do so many additional things. So yeah, I hope this makes sense, and I hope that this answered the question. And I don't know if Richard too, you guys want to jump in on that as well.
I think you've covered it. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing to add. First time for everything.
Remember, #the best.
Yes, exactly.
I'm messing with you. People are gonna be like, "Oh no, people can't handle that." We're joking, guys. We're joking.
Let's have a look then. Do you know? I mean, Coach Bronson, has his torn meniscus healed? Does anyone know that?
Torn meniscus.
I don't know the answer to that. Let's go into question.
Yeah, I didn't even know he had a torn meniscus. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay.
Wonderful live stream. Thank you, Michelle. Dr. Sarah, where can we find the study on plants/animal to share with those who are concerned about sacrificing animals?
If you just go to YouTube and put my name, Dr. Sarah Zaldivar, 25x sentient animals, vegan diets. If you put those keywords, my YouTube video that I filmed on that topic should show up. It's very quick. It's literally like a 3-minute video. But the article that I'm referencing is also in the description box, so you can have a direct link to it.
Yeah, and I think, Rich, you mentioned earlier something about the harvesting. You mentioned on monocrops. Do you want to just quickly repeat that? Because I don't think that was during Sarah's section. You were talking about animals dying.
Yeah, when we desertify a field to grow crops, there's a couple of things. Basically we destroy an ecosystem. The combine harvester will go through that field. And I don't know if you've noticed, but birds and seagulls will circle the combine harvester, and that's because of all the dead animals that it's picking up as it's going through the field. But then we grow crops within that field. It's treated with toxic chemicals. This destroys the microbes in the ground. It kills an entire ecosystem. Birds and bees die off. So considerably more animals die as a result of growing crops compared to eating one cow. So I use a local butcher. The butcher from me is 2 miles away. The distance traveled is incredibly small. I'm using, as a carnivore, I probably consume the equivalent of 1 cow a year. But a vegan who drives to the supermarket kills an entire family of animals every time that they get in the car. I know they're not doing it on purpose, but if you do really care for animals' health and well-being, then being a vegan or vegetarian is not the best source for that. Even when we look at impacts on environment, vegans will consume, and this isn't a dig at vegans or vegetarians. I just want to reinforce that I'm not against anyone's personal choices, but I think that information out there is scarce, and we need to repeat this, don't we? And we'll bring back that study now. Sorry, Stephen. Yeah, we'll read that again now. But we fly in these exotic fruits from all over the world, yet carnivores are blamed for the cow farts that are destroying the ozone layer, which is absolutely ridiculous. Especially when we look at the amount of methane that a vegetarian will release from eating plants. It's preposterous, isn't it? But that study, do you want to bring that back up again? That's a fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, this is the Smithsonian National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute. They've got a global estimate that 67 million birds are killed each year due to agricultural pesticide use.
Wow. Let me take a picture of that. I'm taking a picture of it. I love that.
Yeah. Do you want me to do this? That extrapolates to about 672 million birds poisoned in total, just from pesticide use, just birds. Now I'm a member of the Royal Society for Protection of Birds. And this bothers me in a big way. And I think it is quite surprising people don't realize that carnivores are also animal lovers. If you want to play on my heartstrings, you show me an animal being mistreated. I mean, this morning I was looking, I'm really very interested in this. This is a side I don't really put out publicly. I mean, like rescuing animals. Part of one of the donations I made, that they had a puppy, 4 months old, kids covered it in glue and dragged it through the mud and left it for dead in this cardboard box. We should be looking at stuff like this agricultural pesticides. We should be looking at cruelty. We shouldn't be looking at cows that are out in a field, eating grass and actually I've got footage of cows loving where they are, jumping around and stuff like that, and they have a much better life than animals in circuses and all this sort of stuff. So I think don't want to get into that too much because it's quite sad. But anyway, let's have a look. Let's get back to the live stream. Let's have a little look. Yes, what you said about mushrooms, Rich, has definitely ignited the chat. Kel there, she had a chat with the mushroom 1 or 2 times.
Chat with the mushroom. That's hilarious. I'm glad you had fun.
So, Dr. Sarah, what exercise do you do to raise dopamine?
The painful one. It is the sensation of pain that upregulates baseline levels of dopamine, especially D2 receptor numbers. This is why, like, if you're just walking, there's no pain there. So it's not going to upregulate your dopamine receptors. The only exception to that rule would be if you were bedbound and now you want to upregulate dopamine levels, but to go from bedbound to, you can't jog, so walking even a quarter of a mile feels so difficult for you. So it's the sensation of difficulty that keeps upregulating your dopamine receptors. So let's say if you're fit and you're running and you're doing great, if you keep doing the same intensity, you keep maintaining the same baseline level of dopamine. If you want higher, you have to now push yourself to be able to run faster, which means in order to go from where you normally run to go to a faster, more intense speed, there's going to be pain involved, because that's the only way you grow, right? If I want to grow a muscle, I can't lift the same weight that I normally lift. I have to pick a heavier weight that's uncomfortable. It's that discomfort that allows me to progress and become stronger, have stronger muscles, and also increase dopamine receptors. So anything that is painful will do the job. My preferred method, I think it's fastest, most effective, honestly easiest in my opinion, way to raise dopamine levels is via exercise. And a lot of times, most of the people that come to me, they have they want weight loss and they're struggling with sugar addiction. And so exercise targets both. It helps them lose the weight very quickly, while at the same time targeting the root cause of their addiction, the root cause why they can't stick to a carnivore diet. So it's like two birds with one stone.
Rich, what would you say?
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, for me, the exercises, as you know, I used to come from a bodybuilding background, so it was lifting weights, and now it's destroying myself on a bike or going for a run.
Yeah.
Yeah, running and cycling is my new form of chosen torture. But
as long as you're torturing yourself, you're doing good.
Yeah, and it is a hard place to push yourself to sometimes. I was on the bike indoor yesterday. I was short for time. I didn't get a chance to get out on the bike, so I jumped on the indoor trainer. And it's incredibly difficult to stay motivated in indoor. But I pushed. I was hurting. I was sweating. I did about 40 odd minutes. Yeah, it hurt, but you've got to push these boundaries. If it's not hurting, it's not working. And take that with a pinch of salt to a degree. I mean, I don't want you to go injuring yourself, but you've got to push these boundaries. Moving is fantastic. And Stephen mentioned earlier about the elderly person sitting and standing from the chair, and that was an exercise that was hard and difficult for them at the time, but then they progressed from walking further and further. And it's about pushing these boundaries. So begin at the level you can, push to the boundaries, but it's got to hurt a little bit. If it's not hurting, it's not working.
And then sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just you referenced, just someone did message me about that woman that I helped get out the Zimmer's frame, and they asked, how do you do that on the NHS? I don't work for the NHS, it was private. So sadly, to get the sort of rehab and nutrition advice that I offered, the National Health Service doesn't do those things. So for that. But what was you going to say, Sarah? Sorry.
I was going to say that the pain threshold goes up too. So if you feel a lot of pain when you first try to push yourself a little bit, just know that intensity of pain, you will eventually not feel the pain as much. And the more you do it, eventually you become numb to the discomfort. You're still pushing yourself beyond your limits, and you would expect to feel a lot of suffering, but you actually are numb to it. Like that's another thing to look forward to. And I think that's what stops a lot of people, because they cannot imagine going through 10 minutes of such discomfort forever. And they forget, or they don't realize that your tolerance to pain also gets better. You adapt to the painful sensation, because dopamine is an anesthetic too. That's the reason why dopamine is being upregulated. It's like, oh, I don't know what you're doing, Sarah. You're having a lot of pain. Let me upregulate your dopamine receptors so that in the future, you're not constantly feeling those painful moments, because they seem to happen every day for you. And so eventually you become numb to it. So I can push myself beyond my limits without really suffering as much or feeling the same intensity of discomfort the way that I used to in the past. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that training response is fascinating, and I always use an analogy for the bed of nails. Okay, we have ascending pathways and descending pathways. So if you lie on a bed of nails, initially that's going to be quite painful. So that goes up the ascending pathway across your spine up into the somatosensory part of your brain, and then there's the homunculus there that knows where that pain's coming from, sends a message down through your spinal column to where that area is, and it lessens the pain. It sort of cuts it off at the the impasse. So what happens is you can lie on a bed of nails, it can be really painful, and then 10 minutes later you'd be fast asleep, because you have this instant physiological response. And I know that sounds really not true, but that's what happens. And that's the popularity of the Shakti mats, these mats that you can buy that are acupressure. They're very painful. I use one when I have lower back pain, if I've trained too hard. Well, I don't get the pain, but I just think it's good prevention, by the way, which we haven't spoken much about. Prevention is better than trying to restore yourself after you've injured yourself. And I think that's fascinating. I'm rushing because we're coming towards the 9th hour, and Dr. Sarah, we want to make the most of having you around.
Sure.
I'm going to be wary. I'm going to do a little joke here. So we've got someone called T Ford. I'm wondering if you're a model. Anyway, no. All right.
Is it you, Tom? Send me a suit.
Could you please give advice with regards to gout and high uric acid levels with regards to diet? I seem to react badly with any fructose, well, spotted with gout and wheat.
Yeah. So that's the thing that keeps a lot of people away from carnivore. It's like, oh, you eat carnivore, it has a lot of purines, which turns into and increases uric acid, which can cause a gout flare-up. And that's just not true. If you talk to anybody who suffered with gout and did carnivore, they will tell you that it completely eliminates gout attacks. And that's because your own body can create its own purines. And so as a matter of fact, like you very accurately realize that, it's the fructose and it's the wheat and it's the carbohydrates, but especially fructose, that increases your own body's production of uric acid, which then you start having symptoms of gout with the joint pain and the inflammation. So don't fall for this myth that purines can only come from the meat that you're eating, and so if you're eating meat, then that's going to raise your number of attacks of gout. Like that is actually the complete opposite.
And I think from my history of bloods, you can have high uric acid and no gout, and you can have low uric acid and gout. The correlation between uric acid and gout is not there. And that's from thousands of actual bloods and thousands of data points and people that are coming in and having their bloods taken. And, this is where you look at it and you think, right, now, I should say to you, have you got gout because you've got this high uric acid level? Well, no, I haven't. Right. So that's where bloods and uric acid, they just don't correlate.
A little more complex than just that. Yeah. Very well said. Thank you.
It's okay. Rich?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, purines get a bad rap, but these are created naturally in the body from the breakdown of cells for energy, for ATP and GTP. Purines do not cause gout. 5 to 10 times more created within the body than we get from the diet. When we look at uric acid, it can be increased by purines, but these exist in normal joints as well as people who suffer with gout. But uric acid is actually an antioxidant. is excreted by the kidneys, but over 50% of it is reabsorbed back into the body. So something that is toxic to the body, wouldn't be reabsorbed back into the body. So yeah, this whole thing about purines and gout and eating meat is a fallacy. It's inflammatory in nature, which is what the standard diet would do in regards to carbohydrate and the foods that we eat. Fructose, as we know, that's a contributing factor. Sucrose, elevated insulin, so insulin resistance, alcohol. All of these can be other factors. And magnesium and potassium are known factors to decrease gout. So it comes back to our electrolytes again. But again, it's all of this misinformation in regards to protein. It comes back to protein all the time, isn't it? Protein has such a bad rap, yet it's the most nutrient-dense food on the planet. But yeah, these studies are out there, unfortunately. But yeah, nothing to worry about in regards to protein and gout.
So we've got our new guest in the waiting room, Dr. Jen Unwin and Dr. David Unwin, who I'd like to bring into the meeting and say hello, and then we'll finish with your question, Sarah, if that's okay, which is about tryptophan.
Absolutely.
So let's add Dr. Jen Unwin and David Unwin to the stream.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
Hi, both.
It's a busy screen. We're just finishing off this hour with Dr. Sarah Zaldivar and this final question. So, Dr. Sarah, how do you get tryptophan for sleep on a carnivore diet?
So sleep is actually one of the most commonly reported symptoms that improve on a carnivore diet. And that's because there's so many things that could trigger insomnia. There's so many things that could lead somebody to struggle with falling asleep quickly and staying asleep. I like to remind people that when your brain is not inflamed and you are optimal in your dopamine and serotonin production, serotonin eventually turns into melatonin, and so now that regulates your sleep cycle and your circadian rhythm. And I think that is one of like the biggest reasons why people report just massive improvements in their sleep. And the cool thing is like the sleep latency improves so much. So instead of tossing and turning for half an hour before you fall asleep, I've noticed so many people reporting on a carnivore diet. It's like the moment you go to bed, you're done in like 5 minutes. And so it affects every single hormonal system in the body. Every single physiological system in the body is affected positively. The inflammation goes away. Your needs also for sleep decrease. So you might actually feel like you're going to require less total number of hours of sleep, and you wake up feeling refreshed, because now your body isn't having to deal with the inflammation from the seed oils and the sugars and the addictive foods that you were eating previously. So all in all, it's one of the strongest things. It's like that, and better skin, better mood, better joints. Those are the top most improvements that we see when people first make the switch to a carnivore diet or our species specific diet.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah Zaldivar. That's a brilliant hour you've given us. I really want to thank you so much for your time and the great answers to all the questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. Very much appreciated. Great chatting again. And thanks for the comment on being number one. I'm using that again.
Bye. Enjoy.
Take care. Thanks, Sarah.
Take care. Bye.
So, Richard.